People have brought the judges' first cars to Lemons races, and guess what? They've all taken home trophies.
What we mean by that is bringing to Lemons an example of that judge's first car. So the Sopranos brought a 69 Toyota Corona, which was Judge Phil's first car. They won a trophy. And Judge Eric's first car, that was a Mercury Topaz, and a team brought a Tempo. They won a trophy.
So let's talk about the Ford Tempo. In the 1980s, Ford introduced the Tempo to compete in this kind of weird, compact, kind of mid-size, young family segment against memorable machines like the Chevy Citation and Corsica and the Dodge Lancer.
Yeah, and that was kind of a trend in the Malaise era to have a bunch of kind of similar but mechanically different cars. It was very unclear what markets they were trying to address. They had the Chevette, Cavalier, Citation all sort of at the same time. It was all very confusing, and I'm glad car companies, especially General Motors, are not doing that anymore.
General Motors just chucked a whole bunch of different car models into the same segment, but Ford's approach, a little bit more meticulous.
Alright, I'm gonna need to see the specs on the new Ford Tempo project.
Well, we took some 25-year-old Falcon inline sixes and cut off a couple cylinders and bolted one of those overhead cam things people are talking about into it.
I'm not sure how advanced that really sounds, but does it have good balance and does it have good power?
Well, testing says it's completely gutless and makes the car feel like a paint shaker, but only 10% of the testers got sciatica.
There's gotta be some good news about this engine.
Well, we could reuse the old engine tooling, and that'll save us $1.10 per car. And marketing named the engine something that sounds completely meaningless but exotic. High swirl combustion. Marketing also has given Jackie Stewart a disgusting amount of money to endorse it as a real driver's car.
The Ford Tempo is a real driver's car.
Jenkins, are you ready for a promotion?
Oh boy. So, the high swirl combustion engine was not exactly on the same planet of efficiency as, say, a Honda Civic engine or a Toyota Corolla engine, but the best versions of it made almost 100 horsepower.
Now, if you were anywhere in the Midwest or rented a car anywhere between 1984 and 1994, Eric and I can both vouch for this, these things were everywhere. I mean, everywhere. They made almost 4 million examples of Tempos and Topazes over the course of a decade plus. Today, pretty rare.
Cheesebolt Enterprises, a Lemons team, found a Ford Tempo and wanted to race it because, as they say, we all grew up with these things in our family. We had friends that had them as first cars. That's me. And it's getting harder to find them. And, they're desirable and good handle. I can't say that with a straight face. They're terrible cars, but everybody had one or was in one at some point.
Now, in the first 13 years of Lemons racing, we had one Ford Tempo, and of course it won the IOE. But in the last couple of years, we've added 2 new Tempos, one from Little Enos Racing in the Midwest, and another from Cheesebolt out east.
We'll start with Little Enos Racing and Jacob Eiting, who was brand new to Lemons and to working on cars in general, but he really wanted to go racing with his family. When he brought up the 1992 Tempo on the Lemons forum, some people, wasn't us, we swear, tried talking him out of it. But like a good Lemons person, Jacob wanted to do it more because of that. It was perfect. He found a one-owner Tempo whose owner had recently passed away. The owner's son wanted to get rid of it, knew about Lemons, and was happy to send it to its second life.
Now, meanwhile, Dave and Greg from Cheesebolt, they all are veterans of endurance motorcycle racing, and then they had been running a Ford Focus in Lemons for a few years. They wanted to take a crack at IOE, and they started to ask us what would be a good car for that. And we said, I don't know. We don't want to put undue influence onto you.
Ford Tempo.
So they found an 89 Tempo in southern Jersey that had been an abandoned project with fuel that looked like engine oil sludge and a cabin that was literally full of hornets.
I asked them why you would do this to yourself, and in true Lemons fashion they answered self-loathing mainly, and to lure me to their paddock. Which works. Both of these had the high swirl combustion 4-cylinder engine, although Cheese Bolts had the earlier, crappier, lower power central fuel injection that was a half step up from carburation. Now, I know how bad that setup is because my 85 Topaz had central fuel injection and it suffered regularly from vapor lock.
You know, we had a lot of fun tonight, but there's nothing funny about vapor lock.
The very rudimentary fuel injection computer tends to freak out completely if the car runs wide open throttle for long periods of time. Now, this is a 2,500 pound car with 86 horsepower running in a Lemons race. I wonder what the throttle position's gonna be. So, at Cheese Bolt's first race, the computer spent approximately the entire time in what was Ford's very first attempt at limp home mode, and it resulted in the car making about 14 horsepower.
When asked what it's like to drive, Jacob reported, "In the straights, it's pretty slow, but in the corners and the technical bits, it's also very slow."
Okay, so being slow gives you a good head start on winning an IOE. Having an automatic transmission, which both of these cars do, is another advantage. This is the same unit that was sold in 1980s Ford Escorts and 4-cylinder Ford Tauruses, and who bought those cars? Nobody. So the experience of this ATX 3-speed is difficult to describe if you've never actually driven one yourself.
Again, voice of experience here. Putting the car into gear rocks the entire car for some reason with a giant thunk. The transmission doesn't actually know about hurrying either. Gear changes usually take somewhere between 1 and 9 seconds, and Jacob suggests the little Enos Tempo never actually leaves second gear. At all times while you're driving it, there's kind of this sense of dread, like the ring gear is absorbing all 86 horsepower the engine is attempting to put out, and just driving my old Topaz on the street around town felt like I just pulled the pin on a grenade. It was exciting in the slowest way possible.
Now, even though they sold this car in huge numbers, the tuning community is a little bit lacking. There's literally one speed part for the Tempo platform that exists, and the Cheese Bolt guys, they have it on their car. It is a rear sway bar that was actually sold through Jegs. There isn't anything available off the shelf otherwise. The replacement parts that they've been able to find on eBay Motors, Rock Auto, AutoZone, it's basically free. All of these companies want to get rid of their dead stock. So if you're running one of these in Lemons, it's very economical.
Among the many challenges of tuning a Ford Tempo is the fact that you can't really upgrade the brakes easily. They have a weird knuckle as caliper design that kind of prohibits putting good pads on it, and they're also comically small, but the car is so slow that you don't actually have to use the brakes that much. But you don't need to take our word for it being a performance machine.
I've driven the Ford Tempo just about as hard as I can, both in dry and wet weather conditions. The Ford Tempo is a real driver's car.
All right, so to recap, the first team to enter a Tempo into Lemons wins our grand prize, the Index of Effluency. These two new teams that have run Tempos in the last couple of years, they have both each won an IOE within their first couple of races.
In case you're not picking up hints at all, we want you to bring a Ford Tempo or a Mercury Topaz. Lemons would love nothing more than if we fulfilled Judge Phil's early jalopnik dreams of spec Tempo. And guess what? Ford and Mercury did all kinds of things to try to make the Tempo and Topaz twins palatable.
Yeah, they had a high-performance version of the Tempo called the Ford Tempo Sport GL, and they had a high-performance version of the Topaz called the Topaz GS Sport with a special handling suspension and the 100 horsepower HSO version of the engine.
That stands for high specific output.
If you wanted a V6, you could get the same Vulcan V6 as the Taurus had in later years. And you know what? The Taurus SHO motor used the same block as that Vulcan V6. You could theoretically put the two together, make yourself a Showpaz.
All-wheel drive, there was a selectable all-wheel drive tempo that was kind of unique. It didn't have a rear differential, just like a worm gear. I don't know, but it's weird. You can find them. Most of them are in Colorado still. And finally, diesel. You could get a Mazda diesel in this, the same one they put in the Escort. And if you're really looking for an IOE slam dunk, that has 52 horsepower. So you'll be going even slower.
Now, even with all of these options in mind, there were some combinations that were never offered from the factory. For example, there was never a diesel all-wheel drive manual tempo, which the internet will tell you is the perfect car.
Or hell, we still haven't had an actual Mercury Topaz yet like I had, so get one of those.
And to be honest, we don't even know why you're still watching this. Go out there, get your tempo.